did your interest in crime and policing come about, and what difficulties or challenges did you encounter when you were doing your ethnographic studies, and how did you overcome them? Were you at any point in any danger because of your studies?
Well, you know, anthropology is it's in some ways quite a voyeuristic subject, right? We feel we have the right to go anywhere and talk to anybody and ask anything. And often, in fact, we put the people that we interview in danger. It's not only ourselves, right? When I started doing my first field work, I was working in South Africa under apartheid, and very few communications took place between black and white people. In fact, you weren't allowed to enter each other's communities without formal permits and so on. And people always used to say to me, don't you feel unsafe? And I used to say, you know, my presence in those communities is much more endangering to those people than the reverse, because in fact there were security police watching and assuming that what was going on was something, you know, subversive. So in a way, I think the anthropologist, it's always a dialogue, and one has to ask oneself, we think we have the right to know, and we should go and investigate, but often we are the ones who are privileged. We make that decision. We have that right to go. We've come from a certain position of privilege, and the people we work with are often the ones who are more, there's more at risk. During the time that my husband and I did our first field work during the apartheid years, anthropology was in a much more traditional place. People who studied crime were sociologists or criminologists. Anthropologists studied rural things, tradition, religion, witchcraft. But we didn't study crime or science or urban life or those sorts of things. I think what is wonderful about what has happened to anthropology in the last 20 years is that it has kind of come off the reservation, as we say in America. You're not only studying peripheral issues or peripheral questions or people on the other side of a big divide between the North and the South, or we and they. And you can study anything. It's a question of how you look at it, not what you look at. And after the end of apartheid, when we went back again to live in South Africa, because my husband and I left South Africa because it was impossible to live, you know, a viable, moral, ethical life there. We went back and we thought what we'd be looking at would be democracy, you know, and entitlement and a new constitution. And we found that what people were terrified of was crime. It was as if we had just got rid of one problem, and that was the old apartheid colonial order, and now there was something else. And the question was there more crime? Was it reflecting the fact that the old norms and rules had gone into abeyance, and there was a kind of uncharted territory? Or was it a way that people were dealing with new fears, the fact that they didn't know their neighbors, and that the people who were most afraid of crime were the old elites who suddenly had to come to terms with the fact that the police were not just there to protect them, and that there were new forms of empowerment, and that the crime and the figure of the criminal was often an image to them of their own insecurity. And I think we have to think about why we are all reading, for instance, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, why it is that crime fiction becomes more and more important in our world at a time when we feel very insecure. And so you find in places like Sweden, at the same time, that there's a new obsession with immigrants and strangers, and whether this has to do with our loss of prosperity in the world, and an interest in crime fiction, and that idea that the criminal somehow is a figure around which we can, you know, everything that's wrong in our society is summarized in that figure. So that's in a way how we got to it because it was relevant. And people didn't want to talk to us about democracy, they wanted to talk to us about their fear of crime and their fascination with it. Because we all find the criminal a kind of hero as much as we find it a kind of threatening idea. And so that's really how we came to it.